Go.
Thanks for that introduction, Lisa, and thank you for your patience in getting this talk scheduled. Lisa and I have been in correspondence for probably the last 2 years trying to get this organized, and happy to finally be able to do it. I wish it was in person, but maybe next time it can be in person. Happy to be doing it virtually this time though. So thanks again for the invite and the opportunity, and thanks everybody for tuning in. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about the land care invasive species management program at the Arboretum, and there's one change. There is one change uh, to the itinerary, I guess, compared to what Lisa just described. And I ended up taking out the species identification part of the talk. Number one, I needed to shorten the talk a little bit, and then number two, I figured, with these plant ID apps that so many people are using on their phone these days, maybe it wasn't quite as critical uh, to cover plant ID. I'm happy to talk more about plant ID at the end or anytime after the talk. Just won't be talking about it during the main presentation, and hopefully nobody's too disappointed about that. I actually had a really good joke that was part of that sequence of the talk that I had to take out also. So kind of bummed about that, but maybe I can make up a new one somewhere along the way. So in general, I'm going to begin by talking about our mission at the Arboretum and the role of the land care unit, of which I'm a part of, and just kind of how our staff are organized and how we do our work in general. And then the bulk of the talk will be discussing, some of the invasive species that we deal with, and then kind of our management strategies and how we prioritize and plan and actually implement uh, our work and the methods that we use. That'll be the bulk of the talk, and then I'll wrap up with a few concluding slides at the very end, and then there should be time for questions after that. So I want to begin with the mission of the Arboretum. Usually this is a time where I would ask everybody in the audience to raise their hand if they've ever been to the Arboretum, and usually there's been a few. But I want to begin with the mission because it really is the foundation of the work that we do, and all of what we do really is based uh, on this mission. And it's a three-part mission. There's three different components in no particular order. The first one is to conserve and restore Arboretum lands. Second part is to advance the science of restoration ecology. And the third part is to foster the land ethic. And that's Aldo Leopold's land ethic that he wrote about, in Sand County Almanac and some of his other writings. There's the staff of the Arboretum then are divided up into three what we call work units, and each work unit is a reflection of those three different parts of the mission. And so me being in the land care unit, my focus is the restoration and conservation of Arboretum lands. And then the research unit's focus is advancing the science of restoration ecology. And then the education and outreach unit, as you would have guessed, their focus is fostering the land ethic and doing public outreach and education. So we all have those three separate things that we focus on, but there is a lot of overlap in what we do. This is an education and outreach opportunity for me. So there's some overlap there. We help with research, or the research and land care that we do is done in tandem in some cases. So there's a lot of overlap, and I feel like when we're doing all three of those, things really well, that's really the heart and the core of the Arboretum and our work. The land care unit individually consists of 9 full-time people, me, the land care manager. So thinking of me as a land care manager, it's a little bit different than being a land manager. That's a big part of what I do at the Arboretum, but I'm really the manager of this unit of people. So there's me as the land care manager, then there's 4 natural resource specialists that focus on invasive species management, prescribed fire, seed collection, taking care of what we call the natural areas, the prairies, the oak savannas, the woodlands, the wetlands. And then we have 1 curator of the horticultural collection and 1 specialist that works with him specifically. And they take care of the tree and shrub collection. And then we have 1 person who takes care of our 4-acre Wisconsin native plant garden, and then a ranger who focuses on taking care of trails, trail maintenance, visitor interaction, making sure visitors are behaving and following proper etiquette on the grounds. So we're doing a lot of different things. All that work supplemented by numerous student workers and volunteers, occasional AmeriCorps crew, other Arboretum staff help us out as well. Like I said, we're a team and there's overlap in our work. And then I think Lisa may have mentioned most of this in the intro, but in terms of the land that we're managing, it's about 40 acres of garden, about 1,200 acres of what we call natural areas, and then 500 acres of those outlying properties that are scattered around the state, in addition to the 1,240 acres at the core property in Madison. And then this is just some examples of what the land care unit does throughout the year. I wish we could focus on just restoration and conservation tasks, but we have to do a lot more than that out here and at our outlying properties. Probably could put more things on the slide if there was more room, but you kind of get the idea that we're doing a variety of tasks out here, as a lot of people who work in public spaces have to do. I often describe the Arboretum as kind of a combination of a nature preserve, but also a tree and shrub museum, an outdoor classroom and laboratory, and a park. It's a little bit of all those things. So I'm going to shift gears now to our invasive species management. And I think for me, one of the first things that you need to do with any invasive species management program is define what an invasive species actually is or means to you in your context. So the first time I gave this talk was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, and the intent was for it to be kind of like an introduction to people who are going to do land management or are actively doing land management, but maybe don't have a lot of experience. So kind of an entry level or moderate, level in terms of knowledge and skills and background in the audience. And the idea is that this could be a lot of what I talk about could be applied, if you have a different skill set or background or knowledge base, or if you're managing a large parcel of land or a garden in your yard. I think a lot of these concepts apply across the board. It's just a matter of scale. And so one of the first things you have to do is determine what an invasive species means to you. What's a desirable versus undesirable species that you want to have present, and that can mean different things to different people. And I just have these different definitions up here to kind of demonstrate that. They're similar. These definitions are similar in a lot of ways, but if you read through them all, there's subtle differences, and I think that's important. That the definition can be different. It can be really really site specific, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And at the Arboretum, one defining characteristic is looking at what's an invasive species or an undesirable species in our gardens, especially our horticultural gardens versus our natural areas. And so here is our 35-acre tree and shrub collection, and then some kind of imaginary lines that I've drawn in that kind of delineate that boundary. So, you know, the garden is full of species from all over the world, and then you cross this line over into this woodland, which is a natural area in my jurisdiction, and the definition of what invasive or undesirable is changes just when you cross that line. And so I think that's important to make note of. What one person considers desirable or invasive over here is going to be different than what somebody over here considers it. So it's all about context, and so that's important anytime you're kind of starting out with the invasive species management program, understanding that context. At the Arboretum, these are the herbaceous species that we deal with usually on an annual basis. Some of these are probably familiar to you. Some of them might not be, but we're looking for these pretty much every year at the Arboretum. And then there's a number of woody species that we manage at the Arboretum too. Also, there's native species that we consider invasive in the context of the Arboretum and the natural areas that we're managing. Some of these species can become too abundant for what we're trying to accomplish management-wise, and so we manage against those. So overall, that's probably over 60 species, because a lot of them are clumped. The ash species, the mulberry, the willow, the pine. There's numerous species within those individual kind of categories that we're managing. So well over 60 species that we consider invasive in certain contexts at the Arboretum, and thus we're managing against them. And to me, it seems like a high number. I don't know what the average number is at average site or sites across Wisconsin or upper Midwest or whatever, but 60 seems like a high number to me, and I really think that's a function of our setting and being in an urban environment. So this is an aerial photo from 1937 that shows the current Arboretum boundary in this pink color here, and you'll notice some residential development here on the north and west side, and then a little bit over here on the east side. The Isthmus, where downtown Madison is, would be up this direction. UW campus would be up here, or to the north a mile or so. But you look to the southeast and south and southwest, it's still an ag production in the 30s, and even most of the Arboretum, which was, land was starting to be acquired in 1932, most of the Arboretum was still in ag production, or at least coming out of ag production, and maybe some fallow fields. And then fast forward to the present day, or 2014, when this photo was taken, and the entire surrounding area has been filled in with residential and commercial development. Population is much higher, now than it was then. So lots of people that visit the Arboretum every year to serve as vectors, potentially bringing invasive species into the Arboretum when they visit. You'll notice there's a lot of perimeter along our boundary, a lot of edge along our boundary. So that's all conducive to invasion by undesirable species And then, you know, one of the pros and one of the cons of the Arboretum is that there's a diverse set of habitat types. So we've got marsh and wetland, we've got woodland, we've got oak savanna, we've got prairie. And because we have all these different habitat types, we seem to have all the invasive species that like to frequent those different habitat types. So that leads to having a lot more diversity of invasives on the site that we have to manage, and really, you know, adds to the challenge. Another vector that we have is urban stormwater inputs. We have the unfortunate location of being really low in the watershed. So a lot of the surrounding urban stormwater wants to get funneled and is funneled into the Arboretum on its way to Lake Wingra and then downstream to Lake Monona and south of there, ultimately to the Rock River and down your direction. So these arrows, these orange arrows, are showing where we have inputs of stormwater, urban stormwater, and then the larger the arrow, the larger the input. And you know, this is measured in annual acre feet of stormwater. So at this particular spot, we're getting 513 acre feet of stormwater on an annual basis. And if you don't remember what an acre foot is, that's the amount of water needed to cover an acre of land, about, you know, about the size of a football field, with 1 foot of water. So said before, the core property is about 1,200 acres. A good portion of that, which is, you know, wetland or open water already. And so we're getting close to 1,000 acre feet of water, of stormwater every year. So, you know, almost a foot for every acre of terrestrial land that we have. So a lot of stormwater, a lot of invasive species comes in with that water. A lot of trash and litter and other unpleasant things come in with it too, but it's definitely a source of invasion for undesirable species. So all that really puts our back up against the wall, so to speak, when it comes to management. And you know, we spend a lot of our time trying to manage those. And typical year pre-COVID would have been about 5,500, you know, hours spent managing invasive species. And you can see the breakdown here of staff versus volunteers versus our student help and maybe other crews that we have in a given year. So, you know, we're devoting a ton of time, a ton of resources to managing those species. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to manage. It's a lot of species to manage. So how do we juggle all that in a way that is productive and efficient and effective? You know, to ensure that it is, you have to, you know, you have to work within a system. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a plan. Oftentimes, you need a backup plan, and you need you know, multiple plans for you know, a particular area. So it's really important to us. These are just some of the basic, you know, management principles that we follow for our invasive species work. First one, you're probably familiar with these. They're pretty common, but the first one is, you know, we want to maintain, first and foremost, we want to maintain the native biodiversity of our high quality sites, our high quality areas that are already in good condition. We want to maintain that, and then, you know, restore it in the lower quality areas. And we begin in those core areas of high quality, make sure those are well taken care of, and then we radiate out from those as resources allow. And the idea being that we're going to try to connect all those different areas of high quality to make larger, more contiguous pieces of high quality habitat. Plant species and plant composition gets a lot of the attention when it comes to restoration work. We're highly interested and invested in that also, but you know, we want to look at things beyond just plants, and look at other other critters and living things like birds, especially grassland and savanna birds, and insects, and certain pollinators, and reptiles, amphibians, all those different species beyond just plants we're interested in. And then we're also interested in structure of those species and different ecological processes. Those often get forgotten about when thinking about restoration. So structure being just how those species are arranged through space. And then the example I like to use for ecological processes is fire. Fire was a regularly occurring ecological process that was taken off the landscape, at the time of European settlement. So that's a process that we're actively working to restore to the landscape with our prescribed fire program. We like to try to manage diversely to encourage more diversity. So not getting in the rut of doing the same thing over and over the same way that's gonna, benefit a certain suite of species over and over and over time. We want to mix that up when we can to, spread that benefit out to a wider range of species. And then we're really starting to move from managing numerous small units to fewer larger units. So the way the Arboretum was originally kind of designed and established, starting back in the 30s, were all these small, little plant community types and small parcels. And so we're kind of trying to reverse, you can imagine that leads to a lot of fragmentation on the landscape. So we're trying to reverse that fragmentation and have fewer but larger units. So thinking more, at the landscape scale to the extent that we can, being, isolated within the urban environment there, and only, kind of being stuck at 1,200 acres. So those are our basic kind of management principles for when it comes to invasive species management. I want to drill in a little bit deeper now into how we prioritize. Like that's all fine just for like basic strategy, but how do we actually prioritize? So I'll go through a system for how we do that. And this is probably something you're familiar with or already employing, perhaps. I learned it from the Nature Conservancy when I worked in Illinois, down at Nachusa Grasslands, not far from where a lot of you are at early in my career. But the first thing you need to do, no matter what kind of site you're managing, whether it's a garden in your backyard or, a CRP field out at the farm or 10,000 acre preserve, if you're, a manager for Forest Service or something like that. So first thing you really need to do is develop a goal or a vision for the site. You have to know what you want the site to be. You have to know where you're going in order to know how to get there. So you have to determine what species are present, both in terms of native and invasive, in terms of species that are desirable, species that you want there versus species that you don't. And then after that, you can start to prioritize what your actual management actions and activities are going to be. And so to look more specifically at how to prioritize, these are the things that we consider. And some of this is just useful as a thought exercise when you're trying to figure out a plan. That's usually how I approach it. There's also, you can get a lot more detailed with it and actually assign values and weighted values to some of these different variables here. And then at the end, you plug that into a formula, and at the end you get a score for a particular species, and it tells you you can rate the different species based on that score. Usually, like I said, I just think of this as in terms more of a thought exercise, but it is useful in that regard too. So if you have a number of invasive species on your site or undesirable species, and you're trying to figure out what to do first, you can think about, what the current extent of an individual species is, and think about that relative to what the potential extent could be. Is it really abundant currently, or is it not? Maybe it's not very abundant right now, but it could be later. Maybe it has a reputation for being really aggressive. And so you would want to know those things about uh, each of the species. What's that impact if it does increase in abundance? What's the impact? Is it going to crowd out all those native species that you want growing on your site, or can they happily coexist? So you think about that. What's the quality of the site where it's present? Like I said before, we like to focus on our high quality sites first. So is that where it's present, or is it already in a degraded area where it's not going to make much of a difference if it's there or not? And then just think about how easy or difficult it would be to control. And we like to start with the easy ones first. Feel that we get a bigger bang for our buck in terms of time and energy investment. If we do the easy ones first, we can have a bigger, more widespread impact that way. So those are things to be considering when you're trying to prioritize. And I'll come back to this concept later and try to give a demonstration of how that works. In terms of the methods that we use, when possible, we like it to be based on trial and error, or no, like it to be based on science. Got ahead of myself a little bit there. So we seek out research and results from previous research as much as possible, and try to use that to inform our methods and our decision making. That's not always possible, so in which case, you just might have to do some things by trial and error, set up your own informal experiments and try different things and see how they work, and learn what you can from that. We do plenty of that as well. And then, using the experience of others is obviously can be really helpful to talk to other people who might have similar issues and challenges that you have, and try to pick their brain and find out what they've learned, and share information. So meetings like this are a great way to share information. We really try to pay attention to the timing that we do our work, and matching the right tool at the right time for each individual species. And typically that boils down to working on the herbaceous species in the growing season, and the other months of the year for the tree and shrub work. That's not true 100% of the time, but generally that's what works well for us. Focusing on early detection and prevention is key. Being methodical is key. And then we like to preach, do no harm. Make sure you know what you're doing with your action before you do it, at least to the extent possible, to avoid those unintended consequences. And I like to throw a caveat in here with this one always too, that if you're going to do some harm in the short term, that can be okay if you have a good plan and you're confident that the long-term benefit is going to offset that, disturbance in the early stages. So in general, yeah, do no harm, but you have to kind of think about the long term, and what some disturbance now might mean for future benefit. So go through some of the specific methods that we use at the Arboretum, and a lot of these probably familiar to most of you too, but just to kind of show the range of what we do, I'll go through them quickly. So yeah, we do a lot of just basic hand pulling. Works really well on a lot of species, especially some of the shallower rooted biennials like garlic mustard here. We do a lot of that work by hand. It's a good activity for volunteers. You don't necessarily need tools. You don't have to use herbicides. So there's a lot of scenarios in which basic hand pulling can be very effective. And a variety of tools that you can use to help make that work better, to loosen the soil, to get some leverage, to help pry plants out of the ground. We all use different tools, little hand tools like that. Sometimes for some of those more hardy species, some of those biennials that, have a deeper, thicker tap root, this is wild parsnip here, burdock, mullein, wild carrot sometimes, something a little more substantial for a tool can be helpful if they're having a tough time getting them pulled out of the ground, especially during a dry year like this year. So using a long handled shovel or a spade for extra leverage can help pop plants out of the ground. Either of those work well to cut the plant off, sever it just below the root crown, which would be right here. There's a specialized tool for that called a parsnip predator that does a good job with that as well. But the idea is you sever the plant from the root below the root crown, and even though this part of the plant might be left in the ground, there's a good chance that it's not going to be able to resprout. So sometimes though, doing work by hand, either pulling or with hand tools, isn't really feasible. If plants are getting bigger, if you're dealing with bigger woody species, or if there's just so many of them, doesn't make sense to try and pull by hand. You could think about cutting or mowing down those individuals. And again, it could be as simple as hand tools like pruning saws or loppers, or the steel brush saw is really handy for cutting a lot down, either herbaceous or woody. And then there's various kinds of mowers, from a basic lawnmower to self-propelled type like this VR, to things that mount on tractors, to big mulchers, big forestry mulchers that attach to skid steers, and machines bigger than that even. So again, just to kind of reiterate, whatever scale you're working at, there's ways to scale up what you're doing to be more efficient. A lot of options. Sometimes just removing the seed from the plant is all you have to do. So here's one of our student workers cutting the seed heads off of a common mullein plant. And in this case, maybe, it was too hard to pull. Maybe we just missed it and we came back later in the season, and an easy way to deal with it is to just cut those seed heads off and bag them up and remove them from the site. Because especially if it's a biennial plant, you don't have to worry about it resprouting if you do it late in the year. And certain plants like mullein and burdock, they hold their seed on, into the fall, sometimes into the winter. You can do that work, and you won't have to worry about all those seeds going back to the ground and into the seed bank. So that can be effective if you don't want to try pulling those things or digging those things out of the ground. So for some species that works well. Other species, might drop their seed right away or sooner. And so you'll want to deal with those earlier. So again, you have to know each species that you're dealing with and come up with a plan specific for them. In some cases, herbicide is our best option. And again, that can be done at a small scale, very targeted, with small spray bottles or backpack sprayer, where you can spray individual plants or stumps or small groups of plants. If you've got bigger groups, bigger populations, then maybe you want to do something different, maybe something, with a boom on it, so you can spray a wider area in a quicker amount of time, or, scale up to these bigger units that have 250, 300, 400 gallons that they can carry sometimes. So again, there's ways to, adjust your scale and adjust your method based on what you're dealing with specifically and over what size, over different sizes of areas as well. And then I'll mention prescribed fire too, as a management tool. That's one that, it's part of our restoration work in terms of, a process that we're bringing back to the landscape. But in certain situations, it's a really effective management tool for us too. So really all that just to say that, there's a lot of options. It's good to have a lot of options. I think of all these as, having a lot of tools in the toolbox that you can pull out when you need them and when the time is right. And again, that can be applied at different scales in a lot of different situations. So I'm going to take a drink of water right now. And then shift gears to talk a little bit about how we apply some of that at the Arboretum. And so what I'm showing you here is an aerial photo of about a 40-acre woodland that we have that borders a pine woodland. This is a highway on the south boundary, houses on the west boundary, and then another road and footpath for a north boundary, and then a footpath that goes through the interior. So about 40 acres, oak woodland, kind of degraded oak woodland, garlic mustard and Dame's Rocket issues in this unit that we've been trying to manage every single year since I've worked in the Arboretum, and that started in 2006. So trying to be, really thorough and systematic and visit, this particular woodland every year to try to reduce the abundance of those invasives. So to do that though in a way that's efficient, and not overwhelming to the people doing the work. Often it's maybe a student crew that we send out there with someone from my crew overseeing it. But 40 acres of garlic mustard and Dame's Rocket, scattered throughout, some big patches, some small patches, individual plants. Like it seems like a really daunting task. And so the idea is to break that up into something that's less overwhelming and a little more manageable. And again, this kind of thinking I think works on any scale. So kind of the way we do that for this unit is just draw a couple imaginary lines out from this footpath out to the west boundary, and then plug in all those other kind of boundaries that I mentioned before. And now we've got 4 subunits within this 40-acre woodland. And those are clearly defined because we have road and highway and fence. These are imaginary lines, so maybe we flag that somehow, and then footpath here, so we can clearly delineate those boundaries and know we have clear starting points, we know where to end, we know where we need to go next. And so that might look something like this. Here's our 3 happy invasive species removal people, and they would start try to get in a line evenly spaced along that footpath, and then just move to the west until they get to the footpath on the other side, and then they stop, move down, work their way back across to the road, do the same thing again, move down, back across to the other side, and then that subunit can be covered a lot more systematically and hopefully thoroughly by doing it that way, rather than just having 3 people kind of wander aimlessly and getting separated and lost out in those woods. Just helps us be more thorough. And again, that concept can be applied to any scale. So then this was going to be the exercise where we talked about, how we might prioritize certain certain species, and it was meant to be interactive. Probably works a little bit better in person, but we'll see how it goes on Zoom. So you can see, the 6 squares. So let's think of that as a 6-acre prairie, each one of those squares being an acre. And wherever there's gray background, you can just think of that as, fairly, fairly typical, prairie vegetation, high quality, prairie vegetation. This pink one here, we'll think of that as a special prairie plant that we're placing special value on that and want to make extra sure that that is properly cared for. And then we got 3 different invasive species here. We've got a single individual of a yellow down here in yellow, 8 or 9 individuals of this species in red, and then a lot more abundant is the green one. And then for the sake, well, let's review these again. We want to think about, what the current and potential extent of these species is and could be, also the impact that they could have, quality of the site impacted. We talked about that a little bit already. Difficulty of control is the last one we want to consider. So looking back at this again, let's say this single individual down here where there's only one, so that it's not great abundance yet, but let's say it's highly invasive. It could be really problematic for this prairie. These up here, a few more of those in abundance, but only moderately aggressive. And then this one here, much more abundant. There's a big patch of it, scattered individuals, but let's say it's maybe less invasive or less, aggressive in the short term, but this is what happens in the long term. It can totally crowd things out. So knowing all that, what species would you go after first? Which invasive would you go after first? And the way we would do it, the way I would do it and encourage others to do it, would be to go get this one down here, this single individual, because it's, we know it could be highly aggressive. There's only one of it. So in terms of time and energy invested, it should be relatively easy to control. And so we'll get that one first. And by removing that, we've really cleaned up this acre subunit of the prairie down here. Only a few individuals left. Next, we would move over to this one. Again, there's not very many of them, so it would be, relatively quick and easy to manage. And then we get rid of those 8 individuals and we're done. We're done with that species altogether. We don't have to worry about it, at least for the rest of that year. So what we just say, we just removed 10 plants one way or another and, eliminated 2 species altogether. If we worked on the green one here and only took out 10 individuals, what have we really accomplished? Not much, because the red one and the yellow one would still be over here lurking, ready to wreak havoc. There's still the big patch here. There's these isolated kind of satellite individuals, and those will be the ones we would go after next, again, because it's easy. And by doing that, down here in this subunit, for example, we cleaned out 3 individuals, a couple more up here, and now these 2 acres are clean. So we're slowly starting to corral this other species and getting a better handle on it. So then we do that again, one more round of these isolated kind of outlier individuals. And now it's looking like this, and we got a really clean, distinct boundary around the edge of it, but it's starting to intermix with, the species of high conservation value here. So we want to be careful about how we do that in order to protect this plant. So we'd probably go in and maybe, do some careful selective work by hand, make a little buffer between the invasive and the high quality species here. Typical Zoom fashion, my neighbor's knocking on the door right now. I'll come over later, Tony. So now that we've got a little buffer put in here, we can think about a different way to attack what's left of this clump. There's too many, to do it by hand. So we could come in and mow it. We could come in and herbicide it. We know these have the buffer, so we can do that without undue damage. And, say we herbicide it, it all turns brown and then goes away. And we're left, with a clean 6-acre prairie with this population of plants protected. So that's how we would typically, approach our management. And hopefully, as you were following along, you would have did something similar. Based on your situation and your context, you might have had very good reasons for doing it differently. It really depends on the specific site and the different, variables you're dealing with at that site. So now you might be asking, what does any of this have to do with me? And again, like I said at the beginning, the idea is that these concepts could be applied at any site of any size, and be helpful and effective. So no matter what you're doing, what you're managing, whether it's just a garden, prairie planting, or a big preserve, you have to have a vision and goals and develop your strategy from those. So knowing what you want, knowing what you have, and then being able to prioritize what needs to happen next. And those four different components of prioritization that I talked about I have found to be a good way of doing that. And I would say try to keep a variety of tools in your toolbox. That'll help you out a lot, no matter what you're doing, to be able to, take the right action at the right time with the right species. And then I remind you that it's important to remember the big picture, not just in terms of like your vision and your goals. That's important too, and also part of the big picture, but also thinking about what's happening, outside the boundaries of whatever it is that you're working on and how that might affect things. Think back to the aerial photos I showed you of the city of Madison growing up around the Arboretum and the impact that has had on our land management. What's happening adjacent to and beyond where you're working can have a big effect, and not always positive. So it's important to have your eye on what's happening beyond your boundaries. In terms of what else you can do, this group definitely knows this. Use native species whenever possible to help compete with and combat those invasives and other undesirables. Confirm your source of plant material. If you're getting something from the outside, make sure your boots are clean and your car tires are clean and bottoms of your canoes and boats are clean, and whatever might be able to carry seed from one area to the next. Make sure those things are clean. Lots of opportunities to volunteer to help the cause. I'm sure most everybody in this crowd knows that. And then this one's become a lot more important to me over the years, spreading the word and educating others. And your group does a great job with this. And I think, a well-educated public can be one of our biggest assets, and we're going to need their support going forward if we're going to reach our goals. And I think that's true for everybody, no matter where your site is or how big it is. And so again, kudos to you for this program and all the other work that you do to help, help realize this important bullet point here. So I'll end with this quote that I heard at the North American Prairie Conference back in 2010. Heard someone say it, and it stuck with me all this time. Weeds are like whiskey; they're okay in moderation. So used to be, where maybe my goal or vision was to eradicate every single individual of a particular population of a species or that species throughout the Arboretum or a particular unit, and come to learn that that's maybe not practical or feasible. Um, Having a few on site isn't necessarily the end of the world, as long as overall you're trending in the right direction with more of those species that you consider desirable becoming more abundant, and uh, everything that kind of that domino effect of the other species, not just the plants, but the insects and the birds and the reptiles and amphibians and things like that. A few weeds doesn't necessarily mean you can't achieve those goals. So my goal has changed a little bit from complete 100% eradication to a trend in a particular direction. So with that, I'll say thanks again for the opportunity to talk. I'll leave these resources up here for people. If you want to get in touch with me anytime, if you have questions or want to do a walkabout together sometime, if you're ever in Madison, feel free to reach out. I mentioned those apps earlier. These are the three that I hear the most people using. I don't use them, at least not yet. Personally, I'm still kind of old school and like to use a book and a key if I'm learning a new plant, or I'll ask somebody who might know and go that direction. But a lot of people are using them, and they've improved a lot over the last couple of years. It's my understanding, user-friendly, accurate. So check some of those out if you haven't already. And with that, I guess I'll leave this one up, and then I can start taking questions.
Okay, we have a couple of things in the chat. Let me get that up. Somebody asked, what's a good dwarf oak to grow? Any thoughts on that one?
We don't have any dwarf oaks in Northern Illinois other than maybe just a stunted black oak that you, keep pruned back. But those are found in Southern Illinois or in other areas. We just don't have dwarf oaks here.
Okay.
Certainly not native ones.
All right.
Thanks, Jerry. That would have been my answer too. I wouldn't know of any specific species, but yeah, you could certainly cut one back, a black or even a burr, and let them resprout.
All right. Greg and Karen Ruffner asked, what are some of the common invasive species that are managed effectively by prescribed burning?
Oh yeah, good question. So, and that's tricky because some invasive species respond really well to fire. You've probably noticed that if you've been around fire and visited a unit after it's been burned. Some of those exotic invasives are stimulated by fire the same way our native ones are. So really boils down to timing. Then you want to time that fire with when the specific plant you're trying to manage is most susceptible. So for us, in some of our prairies, like some of our remnants at our outlying properties that are bordered by agriculture, cool season grasses are problematic. They're quite abundant on those boundaries. So we try to time our fires there when, right before or during the time those cool season grasses are starting to grow and starting to send up their flowering shoots, and when they're in flower. And I think that's true for a lot of invasives. If you can time it for when they're in flower, that's when they're going to be the most susceptible, because they got the most amount of resources in, above ground, to be removed by the fire. If you do it, dormant season all the time, those resources are in the roots and can be, used to help it resprout later. So you have to think about timing, and for most species, it's when they're in flower. For something like sweet clover, white sweet clover, yellow sweet clover, we found that if you have a lot of it in a unit, you can burn it in the spring one year, and that seems to kind of synchronize germination. You get a big flush of new plants that same year after the fire. Since it's a biennial, it doesn't it doesn't really affect you that year. It's the following year when it's going to flower and produce seed that it can do long-term damage to your site. So that second year, we'll pay attention to when those plants are getting ready to flower or in flower. That's usually late spring. Sometimes that's June up here. So, maybe a little beyond when the typical traditional spring fire season is. It's past that traditional end date, but that's when those sweet clover plants are in flower. We can send a fire through, top kill all those plants. And again, kind of like I was talking about with the mullein, because it's a biennial, it's at that stage where it's not going to resprout after that. So, maybe back-to-back fires on consecutive years that are timed the right way can be effective. Sometimes we'll do that for a species to get that really lush regrowth and resprouting, so we can do a good herbicide application that year, like a foliar herbicide application. Eastern red cedar and other conifers, if you get a good fire through those, they won't resprout like some of the deciduous trees will. So yeah, that's my answer to that. It really depends on the species and the timing of the fire.
Okay. Jill Z asked if you can go back to your first slide and identify the different invasive species that are on there.
Very first slide, my title slide. Talking about this one. So the big one that we're working on here is gray dogwood. That's what this is. This is a gray dogwood clone that was allowed to grow for too many years. This is a 6-foot student worker here, so it gives you an idea of scale. Some of those look to be about twice as tall as him. Very dense, very shady. This is on one of our prairies. So you can imagine how dark and shady it is underneath here. Not many sun-loving prairie plants growing under there. So that's the main one. That's what was cut all in the foreground here. So that's a problematic one for us on our prairies, and those native clonal shrubs in particular are trees and shrubs for that matter in particular are a big challenge for us on our prairies. There's another one back here. This is trembling aspen or quaking aspen, a clone back here that's kind of doing the same thing that the dogwood was doing. Very dense clone, creates a lot of shade, shades out the prairie plants underneath. There's also some willow. We're kind of looking downhill.
I think she meant the next slide.
Yeah, I think the
Or
one had the
one with
pictures that
lots
are
of
on the
photos
side.
on it.
This one, I think
Yeah.
it's this one.
No, keep going. Where you had the list, this one. I think she means
There's
it.
time delay. This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Canada thistle up here,
Whoop.
Japanese barberry. This is Oriental bittersweet,
Oh, wait a
common
minute.
mullein,
There we go.
one of the honeysuckles. This is Dame's rocket, related to garlic mustard, everybody's favorite wild parsnip. Um, this is garlic mustard here, yellow sweet clover. I've got buckthorn here, and burning bush here, euonymus. Yeah, was that the right slide?
I think that's the one she wanted. And then we have Howard would like to know a little more about the downsides of herbicides, including impacts on humans and other animal species.
Yeah, that's a good question. Don't know if I have all the answers to that. Um, we do try to be judicious and selective in our use. Um, you know, there's always a chance of collateral damage if you're spraying more than you need to and you're missing your target. There's going to be collateral damage on those other plants that are nearby. Maybe it ends up on the soil and getting down into the soil, and then you have to wait, or worry about it breaking down in the soil and not affecting the microbes or getting in the water or things like that. So, we really try to mitigate all that with our work. And I kind of glossed over the herbicide slide. That could be a whole week's worth of presentation. So trying to boil it down to one slide is difficult. I think we all are, I think we're all aware of the concerns with glyphosate in Roundup these days. So, we use very little glyphosate at the Arboretum, pretty much have phased that out. Still a few circumstances when we use it as a spot treatment, but not very often. Use a lot more broadleaf type pesticide or herbicides now. We do a thorough, a thorough kind of evaluation if we're thinking about trying a new one. We have Rusty Patch Bumblebee at the Arboretum. So, anything that might have an effect on insects or pollinators, we're vetting very carefully. So, and again, timing of application can help mitigate any risk to insects and pollinators. So we're careful about that. Yeah, was there a second part to that question?
Just the impacts on humans and other animal species.
Yeah, the industry people would tell you that the impacts to humans are not very great. Take that for what it's worth. For a lot of them, like the process by which they work and affect plants is plant specific. It doesn't have the same effect on people because the metabolic processes in humans are different than they are in plants. So that's a little bit reassuring to me, but there's still a lot we don't know about long-term effects and accumulations and in the environment. We're really careful around water, especially, like I said, we're low in the watershed, a lot of public bodies of water not too far downstream from us, so we're always close around water and only use those that are approved to be used next to water that are broken down quickly if they are in the water or in the soil. So you can, there are some that are definitely better than others in terms of environmental impact, and a lot of information online about that that we use to vet our chemicals and to make sure we're using the least, detrimental ones that are available, and then being careful with how we use it. And then, like I said, having other tools in the toolbox so we don't have to rely on it 100%. That's how we mitigate herbicide use.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on the systemic pesticides like the neonicotinoids?
Those we do not use. I don't know if they're, I don't know if that's a UW, a University of Wisconsin policy, or if that's just our own policy. But yeah, we don't use any of the neonics, for the insect
Mhm.
reasons that I mentioned before. Some of the others that we use are systemic, and we feel like, that's the best way to manage certain plants. Like for Canada thistle, there's a systemic herbicide that we'll use on Canada thistle that's real effective. And all the research that we did before we started using it showed that it, if used properly, no effect on the insects. So again, yeah, most anything that's going to be problematic for insects, we're going to avoid.
Okay. Jill mentioned that she has also done solarization, which works fantastically well if you have the time.
Yep.
And then she asked, what do you use specifically on Canada thistle?
Yeah, that's and the trade name is called Transline, and the active ingredient in that is clopyralid, clopyrlid, I believe. Clopyralid is the active ingredient, and so there's other, there's like generic versions of that chemical that you can get that has that. That's the ingredient that you're looking for, though, and it's selective to plants in the aster family, which Canada thistle is, and also legumes. Most everything else, it doesn't really have an effect on, or it might stress something out, but not kill it outright like glyphosate or something would. So we like that about it, that it's relatively benign to non-target species, and then good on Canada thistle, which is really a challenge to manage any other way.
I have done it in small areas by hand pulling and digging out the roots. But it took 5 years to control just a small area.
Yeah, I believe it. All those little root fragments and rhizomes are all potential resprouters. So there's areas of the arboretum where we've managed it that way too, and it's an ongoing thing in those areas. But yeah, it kind of depends on extent and abundance and what's nearby, and yeah, what's acceptable and what isn't.
All right. We have several people who are thanking you for your time, enjoyed the program.
Hope it was at least a little bit insightful, at least about how we do things.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us again on this hot August night. And your neighbor's probably got a cold beer for you ready. So
he's got a grocery list for me. He has,
well,
yeah, trouble getting around, so I help him out once in a while. So
No.
I think he's got a grocery list.
Okay.
well, then maybe a cold beer.
I got one in my fridge. I know that.
Thank you so much, and we love the Arboretum, and we love the folks of the Arboretum who have talked to us over the years. So you're close by, and we consider you a good resource.
Yeah, we're practically neighbors. So thanks again for the invite. I'm glad it finally worked out. It was my pleasure to talk to you all. So next time you're up this way and you want to say hi, feel free to look me up.
Okay. And then remember, next month, we're going to be talking about oaks, native oaks. Did you figure out the date for that, Lisa?
Let's see. Would be 9/16.
Okay. So you still got time after that to get your order in.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we'll end the the program tonight. Thanks again to everybody for hanging in there.
All right, thanks, Mike. Nice
Yep,
to
thanks,
see you.
everybody. Stay well.
Yeah.